Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Ladd, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 214. Now, we are joined by a very special guest today. Not the guest that I'd said was going to be on today. And if you're watching on YouTube, you will see that this is not Claire Rafferty. Claire Rafferty is going to be with us next week. She had she's got an injury. She's running the Chicago Marathon in a few weeks and had to get a last-minute appointment when we were going to record. So Claire will be with us next week, but we are joined by a really a very, very special guest who I'll introduce you to in a minute, who Pete and I spent some time with last weekend at the Britain's Disabled Strongman and Strongwoman comp. But I'll just quickly touch base with Pete and see how he's doing. How are you doing today, Pete? You okay?
I'm great. That would be funny that if people were watching, they're like, "Oh, Claire had a tough paper on, didn't she?"
So if you are listening on the day of release, which I know many of you do, it's the 4th of October. So it's Friday, the 4th of October that we're going out to you for episode 214. And I think we are joined from Belfast. Is that right, Stevie?
Yes, all the way from sunny Belfast.
Sunny Belfast. Is it? It's chucking it down with rain, I think, across most of England today.
And yesterday. I did a 22-mile walk yesterday, which had been planned for ages. It was a charity thing and all that. And it just chucked. It was awful.
Is that when you did like over 50,000 steps? Was that what I saw?
Yeah. It was like a 22-mile thing. Yeah. Started at 8 and finished at 5. And then today it's literally just rained like nonstop.
Yeah, it's raining. Yeah. It's raining. I've actually been cleaning my stones outside today. As my Atlas stones, I took them outside with a hose at the back of the gym. The ones I got off of Gary, because I did some Atlas stones yesterday, and the 110 and the 120 I got off of Gary were really kind of dusty, sort of sandy. I couldn't get any hold on them, so I took them outside and gave them a good wash and a scrub today, and they're going to be sealed and everything this week. And I'll get some sealant on them, and hopefully I'll be able to get a grip on them soon. But anyway, we're talking about stones there. What I'm going to introduce you to, we are joined today from Belfast by Stevie Shanks. How are you doing, Stevie?
I'm good, James. Keeping well, thank you very much. I can't believe it's been a week since we did the Britain's Disabled show, man. Time flies, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. I mean, we came back a week ago yesterday, didn't we? And it was, as always, the rain's coming down now. As always, it was a fantastic weekend. Well, it's the second weekend that we've done there with them. And it was great. We met some new people, obviously, there. We met you, Stevie, for the first time. We met Mike Della Pava from Miami, who was over leading the loading crew. We met John Williams, John Valgiers Williams, I think, who's a lovely guy as well. Obviously Magnus was there. Obviously Matt Diamond was there. Ryan England was there. You know, it was just fantastic. But yeah, Stevie, we've got you on obviously to talk about your life and your lifting and your kind of take on strength and the way that you do things. You're wearing a Donald Dinnie Day t-shirt, which is incredible. And you've got an epic drum kit behind you. And you've actually got Animal as well from the Muppets. Hey. Brilliant. So Stevie, I mean, we met for the first time in person last weekend, but we're aware of you. We've been aware of you for a long time, obviously, and you were featured on the Stoneland documentary from Rogue that they made, and I think you were also in the Commissioner of Power one that I saw. It talks about yourself and your father as well, Jack, which we'll talk about. So I suppose really to begin with, do you want to maybe just because like when we speak to people on this podcast, often when you meet someone in person, you don't usually say, right, well, tell us all about your life and your background and your history. You just kind of chat. So we often uncover things and find out things on these podcasts that we wouldn't if we were just having general conversation. So, I mean, wherever you want to start. I mean, your father obviously, Jack was a strong man, and is now, you just said he's 89 years of age now, still going strong, born in 1935. Yeah. But yeah, just where do you want to start? I mean, about your life and your introduction to physical culture or lifting or strength or stone lifting. I mean, wherever you want to start, we'll go from there, really.
Where do you start? I suppose that, Jack, for me, I mean, there's a lot of threads come together in your life, and you kind of end up where you're supposed to be in life, I think. But the whole thing really started for me when I was 8 years of age, 1971. I was born in 1963. My father obviously lifted the Dinnie Stones. He was the first man to do it. He lifted them in 1972, and then he went back in 1973 and carried them. So that was all part of my childhood. And I mean, my whole life, my dad was always the strong man. I was always a musician since I was a teenager. I've been a drummer, play a bit of guitar. I've been touring around the world sort of banging drums. So the physical culture side, where I was very aware of it, I mean, I would consider myself a wee bit of an expert on the Dinnie Stones because I've been embedded in my whole life through my father. But it was only when I was around 50 that I kind of decided, you know what, I'm going into my 50th year. I want to get myself in decent shape. And I started, it was more bodybuilding, put a wee bit of weight on. I was 9 stone 4 pretty much since I was a teenager until I was 50. Did a wee bit of bodybuilding. Things went well, but part of bodybuilding training, obviously, you do things like deadlifts. You do bench. I discovered very quickly my arms are too long to be a bench presser, but my body shape kind of worked quite well, and obviously genetics from my father. My deadlift numbers went up kind of really quickly, and within about 6 or 7 months of starting to train, I entered a local deadlift. It was the Northern Ireland Deadlift Championships, and I actually won. I won the whole thing because, I mean, obviously there's points. I was in the Masters division, obviously, but they add up your points and, your lift in relation to your body weight and all that. And I actually won the overall prize that day, which was dead chuffed. And I set a new Northern Ireland record in my age group and weight category for the deadlift. So it definitely sparked something on the strength side, because I was just wanting to get myself in good shape. And then I got introduced to, because my dad was always into like one-arm deadlifts, hack lifts, Jefferson lifts, Kennedy lifts, those kind of things. Or they used to call them the odd lifts back in the day. And it was his one-arm deadlift to 440 pounds, 200 kilos, that kind of sparked his interest in the Dinnie Stones when he first heard about them. So he thought, I can pick up 200 off the ground with one hand, and the big stone is slightly lighter than that, so maybe this might suit me. So that all of that kind of sparked his interest. So then, because my dad did all those things, and because I was starting to get strong, I thought, Dad, I would love to do all those lifts that you did, because it was like the floodgates were opened. I mean, from 8 years of age to 50 years of age, I mean, I was always a sportsman. I played badminton for my country stuff. I was a king golfer. But it just, when I started the weightlift, all of a sudden, all of the knowledge that I didn't even realize that I had sort of just came flooding out, and I started to do one-arm deadlifts. I started to do hack lifts. And I discovered an organization called the IAWA, which is the International All-Round Weightlifting Association. It's a worldwide organization. They have the USAWA as well, which is like a brother-sister organization. That just in the US they call it the USAWA, but they do all the odd lifts, because I wanted to know where you could go, maybe set a record in the one-arm deadlift and stuff. And I found these guys, and they were just such an inspiration to me. And I was able to do all of these different lifts, and because the numbers were coming up. At one point, because I was doing the Kennedy lift, which is basically, it's a Jefferson straddle deadlift from 18 inches. And quite quickly was able to.
Can I just ask, Stevie? I know this is absolutely brilliant and I love it. And I'm holding up this, which is called the acronym HAMMER. Okay. Now I hold this up when I want a little bit more information or explaining something, because our listeners, a lot of them, we've spoke about the Dinnie Stones quite a few times in the last sort of 6 months. But when you say, I want to make sure that we don't lose people, and because when you say like the Jefferson deadlift, for example, can you just kind of paint a picture to someone who wouldn't have seen that before or may not know what that is?
Of course,
what that is, yeah.
So everybody obviously knows that's in the strength what a regular deadlift is. So a Jefferson deadlift is where you straddle the bar. So you put one foot in front, 1 foot behind, bend down, pick up the bar. You have the same grip as a deadlift. So you're basically standing up with the bar between your legs. It's quite a common lift in all round lifting, but maybe not so common in regular and like powerlifting circles. The Kennedy lift is that Jefferson deadlift from 18 inches, so like a partial deadlift, but you straddle the bar. You know, so I get interested in all those lifts, and very quickly was able to lift on the Kennedy lift, 350 kilos. You know, and I had to use straps and stuff, you know, so but I kind of thought, you know what, Dad, I think we should have a go at the Dinnie Stones, and that kind of sparked the whole Dinnie Stone thing.
Can I ask, when you first did your deadlift competition in Northern Ireland, and you won the whole thing, you know, based on, you know, body weight ratios and whatnot, what was your what deadlift did you lift on that day? How many kilos?
I think that day it was 180 kilos, if I remember right.
Okay, wow. And what was your kind of body weight at that time, or what's your body weight? Because you mentioned 9 stone something. So in kilos, what was your body weight approximately?
When I started the bodybuilding, I was able to put on about 1.5 stone. So I was lifting in around 69 to 70 kilos. I kind of went between those two weight groups. I mean, in the IAWA, you've got 65 to 70 kilos, 70 to 70, under 75, under 70. You know, so I was doing the under 70. And then eventually I moved up into the under 75 category. But when I set that one, I think I weighed 69 kilos.
Wow. Okay. And then in terms of your dad, Jack Shanks, so he lifted when he first lifted. So the Dinnie Stones, he was just a people. You did mention it, but he was the first person to lift the Dinnie Stones after Donald Dinnie. Is that correct?
Yes, so the Donald Dinnie story started in 1860, and he's...
Oh, Steve, you've just muted yourself, or someone's muted you.
I think our connection's got...
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, you just muted for a second, but you're back with us now. Yeah, so
So the Donald Dinnie story started about 1860, and it was in his own words that he said that he picked up these 2 stones, one in each hand, and one market day I carried them across the bridge at Patark. So some 4 to 5 yards was his own words, you know. So it was 17 feet 1.5 inches, and that was the story that my dad heard, you know. And there was a newspaper article that was actually in the Sunday Post. And it's a Scottish newspaper. Now we live in Northern Ireland, so it was a neighbour of ours kind of brought the article up to my dad, and he read it, and that really sparked his interest, you know, because of all the one-arm deadlift stuff and that. And he contacted David Webster. This was David Webster played a massive part in the Dinnie Stones. He rediscovered them in 1953. My dad obviously contacted him because it was David Webster's article. And they became very good friends, and David passed a lot of information to my dad, you know. So he was able then to actually build his own replica stones to train on, and he built the first basically training rings. He was the first man to successfully use that method, you know, by sort of loading pins, so you could start at 50 kilos, work up to whatever weight you wanted. So but at that time, you know, if you look now, you've got your Rogue pins, you've got your, you know, Cerberus strength pins, you've got all the stuff that's made by Gordon Ingram, you know. So there's plenty of access to the equipment, but there's also plenty of access, you know, to guys who've lifted the stones and can share their experiences. Dad didn't have any of that. This was all brand new to him. You know, how do you grip the rings? You know, how do you stand over the stones? There was a lot of stuff that he just had to work out for himself. You know, but my dad was very meticulous back then, you know, because he built his own stones. I think he miscalculated the weights. He reckoned they were in around 800 pounds. They're actually 733 pounds. So he built stones. The big stone was 200 kilos. The little stone was 160, you know, so the total 360. It's in around 800 pounds. And he was able to lift them on his first attempt, because my dad's grip strength and the size of his hands, same sort of build as me, in around 11.5 stone mark. But his grip was incredible, and he was able to pick up those big 800-pound stones, you know, with no hook grips, none of that.
And but I think he did it with I've seen it with like a trousers and a shirt and tie, and, you know, like dressed really smart, wasn't he, when he did it? Is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah. For people have said, it's like he's just on his way home from the office and just thought he'd snip by and pick up the dinner.
You were telling us, though, we went to the pub, didn't we, where John walked in, and everyone like stared at him because he's just a big guy, isn't he? And he had to duck his way under the beams. But you were saying David Prowse lifted them, didn't you? Like, but did he use straps or tape or something?
Yes. So the first man in modern times to actually be recorded lifting the Stones was Dave Price. And him and David Webster,
he was Darth Vader, wasn't he?
He was Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And he was also the Green Cross Code Man.
He was.
Yeah.
So yes, him and David Webster went up in 1963. That was the year I was born. And David was able to lift the Stones, but unfortunately he couldn't hold on to them. So he had to use hand straps. You know, and the Dinnie Stones is a very natural challenge. I mean, I wouldn't say it's primarily a grip challenge, but the grip is a huge part of it. I mean, if you can't hold on to it, you can't lift them. Particularly with the shape of the rings, because they're super shiny. They're round, they're different shapes, they're different thicknesses of steel, you know, so the grip is a massive part in it. So, I mean, Dave, it's a great feat, even with straps, to get them off the ground. But my dad was the first to lift them in 1972 without hand straps, and this was a massive deal for David Webster, you know, and for the strength community as it was at that time, because we didn't have social media. We didn't have Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, you know, Instagram, all of those things that we have now, because when somebody does something of significance, the whole world can know about it within less than 24 hours. You know, it's instant access to stuff like that. So all my dad's stuff was all through newspapers. You know, even back in Donald Dinnie Day, it was the same thing. All of the information came through the local press, you know, and that's how Dad got to hear about the Stones in the first place.
Wow. And you mentioned like these odd lifts and things. We had Brooks Cubic on before, who wrote Dinosaur Training. And he talks a lot about he's kind of like a bit of a historian, and we want to get Bill Himburn on as well. From the oh, sorry.
Got you now.
Yeah, you're back to us. Yeah. So we had Brooks Cubic on before, who wrote Dinosaur Training, all about old time strongmen, and we want to get Bill Himburn on as well and things. So these odd lifts, because the majority, I mean, because you're in this kind of community, this physical culture community of odd lifts, and like you say, the IAWA and the Dinnie Stones and Strongman and that kind of thing. I think we kind of think that most people not are aware of this sort of thing, but there's this kind of assumed knowledge, you know what I mean? But I think the majority of people who go to a gym have got no idea about this whole, I'll call it a subculture, but I don't mean that negatively. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like a niche,
completely understand,
a niche culture within strength. And I kind of said, because I spoke to someone recently and said that majority of people aren't really aware of even sort of strongman as a sport, and then disabled strongman is like another niche within a niche, and then like the whole grip sports and the whole grip training and things like that, and then the old time lifting. So this kind of fascination with affinity with odd lifts and because these are like the old time sort of strongman lifts, aren't they? These sort of odd lifts and things that would have been done maybe 100, 200 plus years ago. When you first sort of started doing these lifts, I mean, you obviously become aware of a community around the world who do them, but there's not that much information out there about the kind of lifts that you're talking about. So did you, obviously your father, how did your dad really get involved in this? And then it obviously passed on to you. But I mean, especially back in the day, like you say, before social media, before, you know, even before kind of international TV and stuff, really.
So back when my dad actually started weightlifting at 17 years of age. There was a barbell in his office. He worked for the local council in the transport office. And there was a barbell there. I think it probably weighed about 40 or 50 kilos. And, you know, he was able to pick it up and put it over his head with one arm. Even as a kid, you know, he was very strong overhead. He was very strong in every way, you know, and that kind of sparked his interest. And my grandmother, who unfortunately I never met, but she said at the time, "Don't you be lifting that, you're too small to lift that, you know, you might hurt yourself." You know, the usual, you know, when people could see you lifting heavy weights and they're, "Oh, watch your back," you know, that. So, but my dad, he got interested and started to buy weights, and he's lifted his whole life. I mean, he's 89 now, he still trains 3 times a week. I mean, obviously he's not lifting Dinnie Stone weights anymore, but you know, he's just got into that habit in his life. You know, so but when he was lifting, I mean, yes, you had deadlifts, but I mean, they had what they called back then the odd lifts. And even in the local weightlifting communities, sort of here in England, you know, and throughout the UK, the odd lifts were very popular back then. That's 60s and 70s. I think the things like Olympic lifting were obviously part of the Olympic Games. Powerlifting is relatively new, you know, in strength historical terms. You know, you've got your squat, bench, and deadlift. That would be an 80s thing. So maybe late 70s, you know. But I mean, whenever Dad was lifting, I mean, the one-arm deadlift was a very popular lift back then because it tested your grip strength and stuff, you know.
I was going to say, did he also use, you know, you get like the Thomas Inch dumbbells, you know, with the really fat handles and the fat grip kind of lifts and things like that. I mean, I'd imagine you mentioned sort of like the size of your dad's hands and how much grip strength he had. Did he used to do things like that as well with like the inch dumbbells and things like that?
He wasn't really aware of the inch dumbbell back then and the historical side of things. You know, it's only really when I got involved that we started to research it together, and we found out so much information in the last few years. It's incredible. But the sort of things he would have done back then would have been taking a 6-inch nail and breaking it, you know, with his bare hands, just keep betting it until it got, you know, warm, and then it used to just break in the end, you know. So that's the sort of things he would have done. You know, picked up cars and stuff.
What I find interesting about this is what you've just mentioned there about him doing stuff in the office with a barbell. I mean, who has a barbell in the office now, right? Like, people don't. But they might have a foam roller, but not a barbell. But but you said that, so that would have been like what, the 1952, 53, you were saying, like when he was like 17 or 18 years old.
17, so it would have been around about 1960. The 35, 40, but around about 1950, sorry. Yeah,
1952 or something like that. So, because I was saying, like, George Hackenschmidt was, I think he died in the 50s, didn't he? So there's kind of a bit of a crossover from the old time strongman into your dad, but then, like you said, later on in the 70s and 80s and stuff, it started to change to other stuff. So he was kind of like right in the middle of the two.
He kind of was by the sounds of it, yeah. Correct, yes. I mean, one of my dad's favorite lifts was the hack lift, named after George Hackenschmidt. You know, so that was a very popular lift for my dad, and he puts a lot of his strength down to the hack lift. So the hack lift,
I'm holding up the hammer.
So the hack lift is named after George Hackenschmidt, and it's basically, again, it's a variation on a deadlift. So where with a deadlift we stand behind the bar, with a hack lift we stand in front of the bar. So it's basically just a reverse deadlift. And some people call it the hack squat, you know, because you can do the negative pressure where you can actually lower the bar under control, or you can lift the bar like a deadlift. It has different features to it, where a deadlift, whenever you pull a deadlift over your knees, you have to push your hips forward. This one is mainly kind of getting your hips out of the way, you know, because the weight's behind you, it actually helps a wee bit with the lockout. But you have to get past your hamstrings, hit your hamstrings. So it's like a two-phase lift. You know, but it's a great one for your lower back strength and for power off the ground. And you know, I really enjoyed that lift myself. I actually managed to get a world record in that one.
I was actually just going to ask, what these kind of world records that you've got on the kind of lifts that you do in the kind of the IAWA or the USWA, you know, and these kind of odd lifts. What kind of records have you kind of gone on to get that you've, you know, in some of these unconventional odd lifts that you've done?
Wow, there's a lot of. I think I don't sit and count my records every day, but I think at one point I had 40, if I remember right. Now that means I have to obviously clarify that I lifted in the Masters division, and I lifted in the under 70 class and the under 75 class. So by lifting two classes, if you get, say, you get a record in the hack lift, you know, that you're doing at under 70 and at under 75. So it's the same lift, just in two different divisions. So therefore, you can add up quite quickly the number of records that you get. But the hack lift, I think I lifted 215 kilos in that, and I was weighed about 68.3 that day, if I remember right.
God, so I mean, I've seen this lift. Obviously, it's not something I may have tried it once or twice, very with a very light barbell, you know, just to get the feel of it. But is that do you still do the hack lift? Is that something that you'd still train today, or?
I don't train heavy anymore. I kind of thought when I turned 60 last year, I kind of thought, you know what, I've achieved all the things that I wanted to do, particularly in relation to the Dinnie Stones, and then all the wonderful stuff that came with the Arnolds, you know, with the replica Dinnies and that. But I kind of thought, if I'm not pushing towards something, which I think is very important when you're training with weights, that you have to have an end goal, because that kind of defines your path. Because I had done all the things and I didn't really have a goal in front of me, I thought, I'm just going round and round in circles here, lifting heavy weights, and it's only a matter of time before that catches up with me and do potentially very serious damage. So I still train, but what I try and do now is kind of pass on my training, you know, particularly in things like people training for the Dinnie Stones. I'll bring them up because I've all the equipment here at the house, you know, and I would train people. But certainly in relation to the heavy lifting now, I keep it just I try and keep everything under 900 pounds these days.
Okay,
so do I actually, but that's because I have to.
That's a very wise move.
so 900 pounds is about 400 kilos still, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So that's interesting then. So let's talk. I'll tell you what. Before we talk about, because there's so many ways we can go with this. I love it. Before we talk about kind of what your training would look like now that you're in your 60s and you're training more for maybe health and longevity, and you don't want to get injured and you just want to stay fit and healthy and strong. In terms of what you've gone on to do with the Dinnie Stones, so when you lifted the Dinnies, or you trained to lift the Dinnies, I think when you were 50, and did you lift it in your 50th year or when you were 50? Was that the first time you did it?
First time was October 2015, so it would have been 52.
Okay.
At that stage. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then is that, you were telling me about obviously there's this, well, I say obviously, we don't want to, like I say, don't want to assume anyone knows anything, but there's this Donald Dinnie Day that you're wearing the t-shirt of there.
Yeah.
And you kind of created or got started by trying to get everybody together, I think, who'd lifted the Dinnie Stones to meet on one day and almost have a celebration of strength and the stone lifting and all the rest of it. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how that idea came about, and then how you took it from an idea to a reality, and now something that's it's an annual event, isn't it, up in Scotland? Yeah. Do you want to maybe explain that to us? Yeah.
So back in 2016, it was in August, we made the Stoneland documentary. So Terry Todd, Jan Todd, they came across with the film crew. Bill Crawford came across with them. Martin Jancis was there. And it was a wonderful experience making that, you know, because anything I've done with the Dinnie Stones has always been to try and add something onto my dad's story, because my dad's kind of a superhero, you know, and everything I've done, I've kind of done just to kind of respect him and whatnot, you know. So it was lovely that him and I were invited to participate in this. Obviously, with Dad's history, you know, being the first to lift and the first to carry the Dinnie Stones, he was definitely on the cards for an invite for that one. And we had a wonderful time with Terry and John. But David Webster was there, Jim Splain was there, Dr. Bill Crawford was there, Brett Nicol was there. You know, all of these people who had lifted the Dinnie Stones before together in one place at one time. And I remember watching my dad talk to Bill Crawford. You know, Bill Crawford was part of that Iron Mind website and all that. And he wrote a couple of articles in Milo, which is an old strength magazine, about my dad, you know. So he was because Bill's a keen historian as well. And it was just lovely seeing them all together and swapping stories. And I thought, you know what, wouldn't it be lovely if everybody who's lifted the Dinnie Stones could have this experience as well, just get together in one place at the Stones, and just because it can be a very solitary journey. You know, a lot of people just go up in the snow on their own, you know, with a camera and a friend, and lift the Dinnie Stones, and that's no big ceremony. But whenever you do meet somebody who has lifted the Stones before, and you swap stories, and you talk about, you know, how did you do your training? How was your grip? What techniques did you use? You know, and just how was the whole experience? So I just thought it would be lovely to do that. At that time, there was a website by Gordon Dinnie, who sadly passed away in 2009. But he had listed all of the recorded Dinnie lifts up to that point. So I just went into his website, and just basically through social media, phone calls, friends of friends, you know, in the strength community, thought I just contact these people. I was number 49 to lift the stone, so there had been 48 people ahead of me. Obviously, I knew my dad and all the ones that were there, so I got around about 30 to 35 people I needed to contact who were still with us. The only one I really couldn't get was Dave Price, because he was quite ill at the time. And a couple of guys, unfortunately, had passed away, but I contacted most of them. And on the day, I think about 32 people turned up. And that was exactly 1 year later, because when we were making Stoneland, it was the day after the Aboyne Highland Games. And I think because they wanted to feature the Dinnie Stones and the Highland Games and in the Stoneland thing, so the timing on that was perfect. And I thought, if we do that on the Sunday afterwards, it means anybody coming across, yes, we can have the lovely day, but they can also go to the games and maybe travel around, lift stones, just connects the whole thing, gives them more to do on the weekend. So we agreed. I agreed with the owners of the Dinnie Stones that we would have the first gathering. And to be honest with you, the reason I called it the Gathering was, do you know I played drums? I actually played in a Queen tribute band. So I've been a big Queen fan my whole life. I've been playing in the Queen tribute band for like 32 years. And the Highlander movie, The Gathering,
yeah.
Thought, wow, it's amazing. So I called it the Dinnie Stones, because that's how they pronounce the Stones up in Aberdeenshire. Dinnie Stones, The Gathering. And it was just purely for that. And there was a nice picture of the Dinnie Stones on the t-shirt. And it was just such a wonderful day. I mean, we had Mark Haydock and we had Brian Irwin successfully carry the Stones across the bridge on that day. So that basically doubled the number that we were aware of, because it was Mark Felix, it was my dad, and Donald Dinnie up to that point. You know, there was just nobody else. You know, so it was nice to add another couple of names to the list. You know, and it was just a wonderful day. So when we spoke about it afterwards, we said, look, we got to do this again next year. You know, so it became, and because I spoke to David Webster about it, you know, because he was delighted to see all of this with his background and history with the Dinnie Stones. But he'd always said to me that he wanted to do a Donald Dinnie Day. You know, so I just called this Dinnie Stones The Gathering. It wasn't Donald Dinnie Day at that point. I said, David, look, if we do this again next year, why don't we call it Donald Dinnie Day? Because I mean, I know you've always wanted, and he was, yeah, that's great, love it. Because I wanted his buy-in to the whole thing. I wanted to get his blessing, because I mean, he was such a big part of the whole thing. And yes, so we called the second one Donald Dinnie Day, Donald Dinnie Day The Gathering. So it's now the Donald Dinnie Day Gathering. You know, it's kind of evolved. So it's a lot of words for a title, but I didn't want to lose the Gathering thing, and I wanted to get the Donald Dinnie Day, and then I changed the logo, you know, for Donald Dinnie thing. And then in year 3, thought we had done 2 years, you know, of people just coming along and lifted the Dinnie Stones. Now, I say just, it's a massive feat for anybody, and it's a massive deal for anybody to come and do it, particularly for the first time. But I thought, if we just have a procession of people lifting the Dinnie Stones, maybe they ought to carry attempt. I thought over time, this is definitely just going to fizzle out, you know. So I spoke to Brett Nicol. He's a very close friend, and he lives about 2 miles from the Dinnie Stones. He's now lifted them something like 600 times. Why don't we do a games? You know, add in natural stone lifting games, you know, because we wanted to just add something, a new dimension to the day. And when we added in the games, I thought, right, what we've got to do is it's just got to be natural stones. So the kind of the test of our games is, if you look at the field and rewind the clock 300 years, is there anything there that will look out of place? Any modern implements? If there are, get them off the field. You know, so it's just rocks in a field, you know, but it has really taken off, because I think people, that sort of has diverged away just from the focus on the Dinnie Stones now to stone lifting, because the stone lifting community, I mean, really since Stoneland, stone lifting has just skyrocketed in popularity, so which is amazing to me, because I mean, I'm so passionate about the Dinnie Stones and stone lifting. You just got this, everything's there for you. I didn't have to go looking for inspiration, you know, because even when we come up with new ideas for different events in the games, it's easy. You know, so you just look at a rock and you go, I know what you're going to do with that one. You're going to press that one, you're going to hold it out in front of you, you're going to throw it. You know, there's just so many things we can do, and we're only scratching the surface, I think.
Oh, it's incredible, because we had recently, a few weeks back now, a guy called Alan Willis on from Australia, from North Australia, and he'd listened to or watched an episode that we did with David Keown, Indiana Stones, who's obviously over near you as well. And I think he'd also listened to Sven Rieger from Germany, who we had on, who'd also fairly recently done the Dinnie Stones. I think last year maybe. He did, and he's going back this October. I think. I think he may be going back quite soon. But Alan was then on the beach in North Australia, you know, lifting these big stones, and it's just, and he said, oh, he was inspired by listening to people and watching people, and it's just incredible when you see how this how it spreads, and how the passion for the lifting. I mean, so when is the Donald Dinnie Day or the gathering? Every year. You mentioned it's always on the same weekend, and it follows the Highland Games that are on the Saturday, and it's on the Sunday, isn't it? But what time of year is that?
So the Highland Games are always on the first Saturday in August. That's the Aboyne Highland Games.
Yeah.
And so I always run my event the day after. Now, normally that's the first Sunday, but sometimes, the first Saturday can fall at a weird date. So not necessarily the first Sunday in August, but it's generally speaking first Sunday in August, the day after the Aboyne Games.
Yeah. Excellent. And how many people do you get coming along to kind of to watch or spectate now? Is it grown quite a lot since when you first did the first one or two?
It has grown exponentially. It's massive now. This year I think we had 1,000 people came to watch the show, which is previous years it's been 200 or 300.
Yeah.
But I think it's because it's got such visibility now. And there's things that have happened that you could just, if you were going to sit down and write a plan and say, look, if in a perfect world this would happen, these things have now happened. For example, Brett came up with an idea for the nickel walking stones. We will use it at Charlie Blair Elephants Highland Games up in Blairgowrie, and the Giants Live have now taken those on. And
I think I saw the nickel stones carry at Giants Live at the Royal Albert Hall. I think.
Yes, they were there.
A couple of years ago, they had the nickel stones there. Yeah.
Yeah, they did, and they've had them in quite a number of the Scottish events and whatnot. They featured over the weekend there in Scotland's Strongest Man.
Yeah.
So that has now progressed even further, because at World's Strongest Man this year, and if anybody doesn't watch World's Strongest Man until Christmas, just mute your microphone.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Just mute for a wee second, because they actually used replicas of the nickel walking stones as event one in the World's Strongest Man this year. So wow, from our little humble event, that's now featured there. They're using replica Dinnie Stones at the Arnold's. So I'm like, flip me, that all of this has come, from that little seed that we planted back in 2016, making Stoneland. It's just wonderful to see it. You're talking about earlier on. It's a very interesting topic. You're talking about odd lifts, talking about stone lifting, strongman, power lifting, Olympic lifting. It's now starting to cross over. I always say we're stronger together, and we're now seeing crossover with stone lifting, Giants Live, World's Strongest Man, the Arnold's. I mean, even Brian Shaw's event now. With the Shaw Classic. All of those things are now starting to dovetail, and they're all starting to feature natural stones, not just Atlas stones. I mean, we're talking about explaining. You hold up your wee Thor's hammer. I'm going to hold up one now for you. If I had a hammer, I would hold it up here, right? So Atlas stones. People know about Atlas stones all over the world. So what's the history of those? Where did they come from? So there's a stone in Scotland. It's probably about 20 miles drive from where the Dinnie Stones are in Aberdeenshire. It's called the Inverstone. It weighs 265 pounds, or about 120 kilos in new money. I still think in pounds. I'm just an older guy. So that little stone, it's a very historic stone. It used to be lifted onto a wall at waist height outside the Inver Hotel. That's how guys got a job on the farm. That's how Donald Dinnie got his name. So Donald Dinnie's father, Robert Dinnie, was a very strong guy, and he could lift the Dinnie stones and all that. And Dinnie talked about his father, but his father put out a challenge, and he said, anybody who can lift this stone, I think it was up the shoulder. I mean, the detail does get distorted over time, but it was to do a good lift with the Inverstone. He said, I will name my first son after him. So it was a guy called Donald MacDonald who actually lifted the Inverstone and actually met Robert Dinnie's challenge. So therefore, he named his first son Donald, and that's how he got his name.
Wow! So his name was Donald MacDonald.
Donald MacDonald was the guy who
MacDonald. Okay, wow!
You couldn't make it up, could you?
You honestly couldn't make it up. So with the Inverstone, because you have a historic stone, I mean, I'm of the belief, very, very strongly of the belief, you cannot use historic stones as competition. You must respect the original challenge. So if the challenge is pick it up and put it on the wall at waist height, do that. And then there's other ones that you want to press, ones you put on your shoulder. But if you want to do it in competition, go and find some stones, you know, and make them competition stones. So that's exactly what Dougie Edmonds and David Webster did with the Inverstone. They created the McGlashan stones in the 80s, which you would have seen Jeff Capes, Bill Kazmaier, John Paul Sigmarsson lifting them onto barrels. So that was to replicate the Inverstone, and the barrels at waist height was replicating that challenge. They started at 80 kilos up to 140 back then. So that was the progression then from the Inverstone to modern competition stones. And then they progressed and they became part of the American strongman scene, and they called them the Atlas Stones after Charles Atlas, you know, he had the big world on his shoulder. So all of these Atlas Stones that you see, the ones you got off Gary at the weekend, all these all over the world come from that one little egg-shaped stone in Aberdeenshire in Scotland. I think it's important that people know the history of these things. You know, that somebody just didn't say, "Oh, I'll just make a big round ball out of concrete," and people lift it. You know?
No, that's it. And I saw a video the other day. You say about the traditional, I think you said 80 up to 140. I saw a thing on, it's on Instagram or something. It had Magnus in the other day, and it was from like the 90s, obviously, when he was competing World's Strongest Man. And it said something like, "Dance if you love the Atlas Stones," and he was doing them on a beach, on lifting them from sand, but like you say, up onto barrels, and the barrels had sand on the top of the barrels so that the stone didn't roll when it landed on there.
Yeah,
and he goes all the way along, and he does the whole run, and then he does this famous sort of dance that he does, and it's really funny. But I hadn't actually realized that you said about the barrel, the height of the barrel is kind of related to the height of like the wall, which may have been like, you know, chest height or you know, kind of stomach height, chest height, which is really, really interesting. Oh, this is incredible. These stories, Stevie. Pete wants to say something. He's got his finger up.
We had a conversation in the pub as well. You weren't there, James, and because I was asking Stevie about the thing of, you know, because it was lift a stone onto a wall or lift it to your shoulder or whatever. But there was ones where if you could pick the stone up and carry it in and put it on the bar, you get a free beer. But Stevie told me, you said this is a bit, it's like the history behind that's a bit sketchy, isn't it? But the story, you tell it, because honestly, this is brilliant. It's not just putting it on the bar. It's like where you put it on the bar. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think that there were stories that concerning the Inverstone about sitting on the bar, but the one that I heard, I was good friends with a chap called Peter Martin. He was an amazing stone lifting historian. He sadly died a week before I lifted the Dinnie Stones in 2015. But he passed me lots of information because his focus was Scotland and the Scottish stones. But he had made some notes and I started collecting different wee stories, you know, just planting seeds about stories over here in Ireland. Because when we started this, there were no, I mean, there was no Indiana Stones back then. You know, I mean, even like a whirlwind has just appeared out of nowhere. But back then, I got a few wee pearls of information from Peter, and one of them was about a so-called stone they would have lifted in the Wayside Inn in a place called Parkgate, which is in County Antrim. Now, I grew up, but 1979, we moved to Ballyclare, which is like 4 miles from that pub. So when I was 16, I was sneaking in there, getting pints underage and stuff. So I knew exactly what he was talking about, but I'd never heard anything about the stone. So I went up and I spoke to the owners and explained what I was trying to find, because I really wanted to uncover stones in Ireland. Now, all of the leads that I got kind of took me nowhere, and I met David, and I passed one to David, and he found that one, and then away he went. He's been amazing. He has, but apparently the story was that it wasn't a stone, it was an anvil. And at closing time, it was, "Right, guys, drink up now, it's time to go." So some of the big farmers would have picked up the anvil. And you know the wee bit that closes in the bar? Well, they would have closed that down and set the anvil on it, so the barman couldn't get out. If you pour us one more pint, we'll let you out. And that was the story. You know, those are great stories, you know, for a lot of these things. And when we stories like that come up, I think it's important that we keep those alive, you know.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. I think it's brilliant. I love that.
It's great, and obviously we've watched the Icelandic documentary as well, Full Start. You know, so, and just because you mentioned the anvil, you know, because a lot of the stuff you see in the Iceland one, and I'm fortunately going over to Iceland in November for the Magnus Classic, and going to have 5 days over there. So hopefully I'll get to drive around and see a lot of things over there. But a lot of the kind of, they were blacksmiths and fishermen, and they're very simple things, and they used to have to like you say, lift up the anvils and hold an anvil by like the nose, or I think it's
by the horn, yeah,
by
yeah.
the horn, yeah, you know, all that kind of thing. And they also had like anvil lifting in World's Strongest Man, didn't they? You know, as part of like a loading medley, they'd often have an anvil and things in there. So, like you say, it's incredible how probably the historic stories and the traditions from the past then kind of moved into the more American style, you know, and World's Strongest Man and lifting and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. Oh
Yeah,
no.
I'll say, I think when you look back at strength and how strength evolves, I think that a lot of these events, so for example, talking about the Atlas Stones, you know, that was originally, you know, up to 140 kilos. And look what they're lifting now. I mean, even at Scotland's strongest man level now, the heaviest one's 200 kilos.
Yeah.
And the wall at waist height, that has now evolved. You know, putting things up. I mean, if you're under 6 foot tall, you more or less have to press the first stone to get it on to get it onto the first platform. You know, when they're doing stone loading events, it's just got higher, heavier. The shape of the balls. I mean, I've one out there. It's 120 kilos. It's an 18-inch diameter. I think it's a massive stone. But some of these stones, I know those ones that you got. I mean, the diameter of these things alone. You know,
Yeah.
if you're not Tom Stoltman with arms like an albatross, you know, you have no chance of even getting round to the bottom of these stones. You know,
Yeah.
so it's the evolution of it, and that's only natural, you know, because I see people now who want to pick up the Dinnie Stones and hold them for time. They want to pick up the Dinnie Stones and see who can walk the furthest with them. That's just, you know, I mean, I'm big about the history, but at the same time, you know, you can't stop progress and people wanting to take things a wee bit further. You know, even for myself, when I picked up the Dinnie Stones, I just wanted to pick them up and set them down. I never wanted to worry about carrying. But then I remember my dad telling me a story that when he picked them up one day, it was the day he was going to carry them, and he was worried, you know, because I don't know if I can do this. He'd walked his replicas around the garden, as you do, but he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to pick them up. So he said, if I'm unsuccessful in that, at least what I'll do is I'll do a good lift for the stones, and I'll pick them up and I'll hold them for 10 seconds. So he picked them up, held them for 10 seconds, and that was always in my mind, you know. And there was one night I was just out training in the garage. I had loaded up to full weight, and I picked them up, and I actually thought, oh, that feels very comfortable. So well, but I'll just hold on them for a while. And I got just about that close to 10 seconds, you know. So and the Dinnie Stones, you know, it's just pick them up or walk with them. That's the original challenge. But we all want to push ourselves a wee bit further. We want to pick them up side by side. We want to walk a few steps with them. We want to, you know, it's just human nature. And if it wasn't for that competitive side of our natures, you wouldn't have competition. Your strength wouldn't evolve. You know, competitions wouldn't evolve. Events wouldn't evolve. You know, so it's a great quality to have as a strength athlete, I think.
I think Magnus said when we hosted him for a workshop not too long ago, he was saying that back in, like, say, the 80s, the 90s, you know, people, you turned up to like a strongman competition and you didn't know what the events were going to be. You just turn up and you do them. And also no one really had access to all of the implements. So people didn't have logs at home or Atlas stones at home or in their gym or yokes or any of that sort of stuff. So you kind of turned up and you didn't really know what you were coming to. And I suppose that's the same with the Dinnie Stones and with stone lifting now, where and social media, because you can watch videos, you can probably watch tutorials, you can, like you say, get the replica pins, you can practice everything. Whereas back in, you know, certainly when your father would have done it, you know, you turn up, there's not all the knowledge around how to do it. You almost have to try and, it's almost like a puzzle or a problem that you have to work out while you're there, you know. And I think you mentioned to me when we were talking the other weekend about how one of them, you can kind of put it across your body and it almost tilts it up a bit, and then it shortens the lift by a few inches because it kind of changes the shape of the stone on the floor and things like that. So all of that knowledge that you've got, you can then pass on to others.
Yes.
So I suppose it makes it more likely that they'll have a successful, obviously you still have to be strong enough to do it, but it kind of, all those tips and tricks, you know, that you can pass on to others makes it more not easier, but more accessible, more likely they're going to lift it properly because they've got some of these insider tricks and things. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of good technique. You know, it doesn't matter what weight you're lifting. If you're using good technique, you're going to maximize your strength for a start, but you're going to minimize the risk of injury as well. You know, when people come to me for training on the stone, some of the guys, well, right, how heavy can we go? I'm like, no, we're not going heavy today. We're just going to spend a few weeks. We're going to work on technique. Once I'm happy that your technique is at a certain standard, then we can start pushing the weights up. Because it keeps them safe and it embeds good habits. Because when you get a good habit and you repeat it and repeat it, it becomes second nature, and you don't have to think, and then you can start concentrating. On like, how far can we push this, and then you get into like a regular. For me, it's just trust the process. I mean, you learn good technique, and then you do these different training routines that you do to help build your strength. And if you apply the process, then the end results, generally speaking, you'll be successful at the end of it. It's just patience and time.
Yeah. And I suppose then if we touch on now, you mentioned that you're training now, you're sort of 60 years of age now, or in your
61 now.
61, okay. And how now you've kind of decided to take off the emphasis on trying to lift as heavy as you can and breaking records and that kind of thing. So what does and obviously I'd imagine, I mean, drumming, like how often are you playing like gigs in bands and things? Because you're part of two bands, aren't you? You're part of, like, well, just tell us. So
I'm always at something musically, because for example, at the weekend down here, the band I'm in at the minute, it's a Queen tribute band called Flash Harry. We've been doing it for 32 years.
Yeah.
And some years we were doing 90 shows a year. Plus your day job, so it was just, you were constantly gigging all the time. We cut it back now to about 30 shows a year. But every now and again, somebody would say, Stevie, my drummer can't make it. We just step in with us. And on Saturday past there's a local band called Glam Slam. So they do all like the Sweet and Mud and all that, Susie Quattro, all that sort of glam rock 70s stuff, which I absolutely love. And they've been offered an opening slot for Shiwadi Wadi, who were playing on Saturday night here in Belfast in the Ulster Hall. So they got the slot. Their drummer's away on holidays. He said, "Will you stand in?" I flipped. I definitely. When is it? Let me at it. Great fun doing that, So one of the things, and what's kind of come to this, I know I was talking about things, certain things happen in your life, and it all kind of leads you to where you're supposed to be. I ride motorcycles and I promote events, for motorcycles, like motorcycle rallies, etc. And we used to run an event called the Snakebite Rally for the Key Vipers Motorcycle Club, and I would have booked all the entertainment for it. And one day, these guys just turned up out of nowhere. They were all dressed like Braveheart. It wasn't kilts; it was the proper plaids. And my goodness, they looked amazing. But they said, "Could we perform at your?" And I, sorry guys, the program's full. I can't tell somebody not to play. But I said, "But how long's your set?" He said, "It's about 20 minutes." And I said, "Tell you what, we've got a 20-minute changeover between bands. What we'll do is we'll put some lights and some smoke on the floor. If you can perform there, off you go, no problem." Because it just looked amazing, and I was intrigued to see what they did. And they came out with the bagpipes and the smoke. Next thing, the drums kicked in, and I was like, wow, the hairs in my arms stood up. It's just that big, massive sound. So these guys are called Clann and Drumma, which is Scots Gaelic for child of the drum. And we became very good friends. And unfortunately, the guy who runs the band, or who ran the band, Joe, he passed away in 2009. And the family gave me his plaid, which I still have, and I would wear it. But any time that the guys are over here, or if I'm in Scotland, I put my plaid on and go bang a drum with them. We're out in France and stuff with it. It's been amazing. It's really good at the Highland Games when you have these guys, because it's such a big sound. But that taught me, how to wear a traditional kilt, which I do now. I don't wear a normal kilt. I wear a plaid where you kind of have to wrap it around you and do the whole Braveheart side of things. So I had that and other things that kind of, obviously, we all know about my dad's connection to the Dinnie Stones, but all of the Highland Games that are run around Scotland have a clan behind them. So the Aboyne Highland Games is actually run by the Gordon clan. And my mother's maiden name's Gordon. Okay. So between my dad's connection directly to the Dinnie Stones and my mum's connection to the Gordon, because I obviously am a Gordon, it's just my name's Shanks, but I'm half Gordon, half Shanks, so but my mum's connection, I was never escaping the Dinnie Stones thing. And then all of my knowledge on how to put on events through being a musician all my life, I was able to put together, I can organize all of the background stuff for the gathering. I'll not say easily, because it requires a lot of work, but I know how to do it. Things like actually lifting the stones. I have my dad to show me all of that. My knowledge of the Dinnie Stones, everything has come together, and all of those connections, I mean, you look at all those things you did all your life. and you add them all together, it ends with the Dinnie Stones for me and the Gathering. You know, that they all were pointing that direction. You wonder why you do things at some point in your life, you know, but then when you look for these skills, they're all there. You know, and I've always felt that that this was, even though it didn't start until I was 50, I was always think I was going to be involved with the Dinnie Stones, you know. But it's wonderful. It's been a wonderful ride so far, and it's the fact that we were talking about the growth in it. We were hoping to live stream this year, but we had a technical issue on site. But we have recorded it, and it will be coming out through the Giants Live channel now. And they've actually made 4 episodes. They had that much footage that they got from the day, so that's now going to be coming out, and people all around the world would actually be able to see the event now, because you know, we see snippets, people put stuff up on YouTube and their social media, but we're now going to have a gathering program, and next year we will live stream. You know, so I mean that's from that little gathering of 30 odd people on Pawtucket Bridge in 2017. You know, to now that was the 8th gathering we just run in August. You know, and the 9th we're coming up. Before you know it, it'll be 10 years old. And my dream, if you want a dream, or my vision for it, would be that if I walk away or can't do it anymore, it has its own life and will continue. And I think we're at that point now, you know, because I mean, Brett Nicol and his team, they provide all the stones for me, and what a job they do, you know. And they'll go down and they'll work at Giants Live. They worked at the Arnolds, you know. They can work anywhere now, these guys, you know. So if you're going to do something, surround yourself with the best people. And I think that's what we've done with the gathering, you know.
Yeah, this is incredible. Pete, are you up for a trip to Scotland?
Yep.
People have to come up, because this just sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, yeah, it's. I love the way that obviously I love the way that you explain everything, but I love like you say, the strands, the interconnection between all aspects of not just strength and physical culture, but you know, your life and like you say, music and your heritage and your father and Scotland, and you know, everything. Just putting the events together is just incredible. So no, this is great. Do you want to touch on, can you just tell us a little bit about this new documentary that's just come out called Stones, which you mentioned? This has literally just come out like within the last week or two. I think who put this together, and how can people access this now?
Yeah, so it actually premiered last Saturday when we were over at Gary's Games. So I mean, I had to miss the premiere, but I mean, I didn't mind, because what we did over there I thought was an amazing event that Gary put on. You know, but so it's a guy called James. His company's Maximum Iron. You'll see him on Instagram and Facebook, etc. as Maximum Iron. So this is a guy who lives in England, and he drives around on a scooter, literally a scooter. You know, I think it's a 600cc scooter with his helmet and his wet gear. He doesn't rain, hail, or shine. All his camera gear strapped to the back of this wee scooter, and he travels all around Scotland, England, Wales, just meeting up with. He'd hear about a stone tour. He'd go up and hook up with the guys, just record things. So I think he spent the last 3 years gathering footage. You know, he's been at the Gathering. He's been at the McGregor Games that Jamie Gorian runs. You know, he's been at all the different events, and he's recorded stuff, and he's put it all together, and he's made a movie, and it's called Stones: The Rise, Fall, and Rise of Scottish Stone Lifting. You know, because I mean, it was very popular, then it fell away, and now it's come back again. So that's The Rise, Fall, and Rise. It's a very clever title, but it basically just features all of the. And let's say the main people, because I mean, we're all stone lifters. It's a very personal journey. You just go and you lift the stone. But all of the guys who would feature heavily in social media when it comes to stone lifting, he featured all of those guys. You know, he did a nice wee section about my dad and myself, which was lovely. And he's featured the Gathering. He's featured the Inverstone. You know, oh my goodness, every stone you can think of, the Bereaving Stone, and he gives the history of the stones. It's all very brief, because you can talk. I could talk for hours about this stuff, you know. So he's obviously tried to fit, and it's an hour and 50 minutes long. He's actually made it available for download. I think you go to a site, you can actually download it. It's like £6, you know. It's for nothing, you know. And the quality of the footage and the interviews with all that. I mean, he interviewed Chris Beetham, who is now Scotland's strongest man. He was also he was last year's Donald Dinnie Day champion. He was, you know, and he's interviewed Conor Curran, who was Scotland's strongest man. He was also a Donald Dinnie Day champion. You know, so he's featured all of these guys. Andy Kearney. I don't know if you know much about Andy Kearney. Andy Kearney was one of the first guys who was out promoting stone lifting, and back in 2009 he went to the Inverstone, and he basically picked it up. It was like a beach ball. It was that light, rolled it straight onto his shoulders and up. You know, in the IAWA, we call that a reflex press. So you clean the bar to your shoulders and push. So there should be no pause in the motion, where normally you would sort of settle the bar and do your clean and jerk or whatever. So this is so he did a reflex push press with the Inverstone. Never seen anything like it. And he also did it with the Mingus Stone. So that's Castle Menzies. It's also in Aberdeenshire. And it's 115 kilograms, but it's actually harder than the Inverstone because it's like glass. You know, it's like when you're talking about getting no purchase, this thing is literally like it's made out of glass. Did the same thing, reflex press over his shoulder. Never seen anything like it in my life. So we had a good chat with Andy Kearney on that. You know, he talked with Brett Nicol, Mark Sheriffs, Jimmy Gorian, you know, all of those guys. And I was able to watch it when I came home from Gary's event. I was able to get it downloaded and go and have a wee watch. I put it on the big screen, and it was a wonderful to watch it, because I mean it's all the people that I know and that I work with, and just seeing all your pals up on the big screen is lovely.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to do it, because I know that I mentioned Emma Gray to you while I was away, who was a lady who was training for the Dinnies at my place, who she's injured herself a little bit now, but she downloaded that to watch, and someone else I know has. So I think I saw David Keogh mentioned it as well, the documentary. So yeah, no, I'll definitely watch that. No, that sounds brilliant. So yeah, that's Maximum Iron, and the documentary is called Stones. And like I say, yeah, I think it was like $6.99 or something to download.
It's really cheap. That's for.
And I watched the trailer. The trailer looked fantastic. I mean, the trailer's great as well. You know, watched that recently, so that would be brilliant.
Yeah.
Stevie,
than a Coke and a popcorn.
No, Stevie, this has been great. And then just to touch on your training now, then. So, what does what does it look like? Because we have lots of people who listen who are probably in their 50s or 60s and beyond, you know, 70s even. And like, you've gone from, you know, setting and breaking world records and, you know, lifting hundreds of kilos, you know, in odd lifts, and you made the decision to kind of, you know, minimize injury and maximize health, I suppose we could say. What does your kind of weekly, we went off on a bit of a tangent, because I was going to say you're drumming.
I know, like we started to talk about
no, it's not a problem. No, it's great to go off on a tangent. No, I'm not saying it because of that, but I was going to say earlier, because drumming keeps you really fit as well, doesn't it? Like, that's hard work, drumming on stage for hours, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not one of these guys that tickles the drums. I beat the living daylights out of them. I've always said, no matter how hard you hit your drums, they'll never hit you back. so that's where I get all my cardio. You know, I mean, I don't get on running machines and all that. It's just a couple of hours on the drums. And you were talking actually earlier on there about Pete and his steps, about his so many thousand steps.
Yeah.
As part of my insurance plan, my life insurance plan, if you do X amount of steps per week, then you get rewards. You know, you can get cinema tickets, or you get a few quid back at the end of the year. And one of the things I do is, when I'm drumming, I have a wee Fitbit watch thing, and I wear wristbands when I play the drums. So I stick the Fitbit under my wrist. So in 2 hours, I get 27,000 steps. That's me for the week. So just a couple of hours in the drums, 27,000 steps, and I would stick my wife's one down my sock. 19,000 steps, you know.
and then you get some free cinema tickets or money off your life insurance. Brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. Don't tell the insurance company that. But in terms of weight training, you know, the first thing I suppose any trainer does when somebody comes to you, I want to lift weights. What's the end goal? Do you want to get strong? Do you want to get toned? Do you want to get big? You know, because you have to define the end goal to define your path. So the end goal for me now is not to be have that level of strength. It's just to keep myself in decent shape. You know, that I don't end up with a big beer belly or get out of shape and risk sort of heart problems, etc. So my rep range would be in the 8 to 12. You know, so sort of like what bodybuilders would do, but I'm not taking the massive intake of protein, because people say, you know, that big guys, whenever they stop training, the muscle turns to fat. Muscle doesn't turn to fat. Muscle goes away. But the thing, the big change is they stop lifting, but don't stop the diet. You know, everything starts at the dinner table for me, you know, in terms of strength. So if you're going to stop training, obviously put your diet down to reflect the energy that you expend, you know. So matching diet to training, I think, is very important for me. And I'm not taking a massive intake of protein anymore. Because with the rep ranges that I'm doing, I just want to keep myself certain level of strength in reasonably good shape, but not to build muscle. It's just to maintain for me now. You know, and because the fitter and stronger you are, it makes playing the drums a lot easier. You know, when you are fitter and stronger, if you're unhealthy and you're trying to play drums and you're trying to go full steam for 2 hours, it's tough on you. So it is, you know, particularly when you're someone like me.
So what would you say? How many times per week do you do some kind of strength training now?
So one of the things that I learned from my first trainer, who was a bodybuilder, he was Mr. Northern Ireland 3 times, is recovery. The older you get, recovery is the thing. It's not how many times you train, it's how long do you leave between muscle group training. So you train muscle groups, you know, you would train arms, shoulders, chest, maybe in one day, and then leave it a week. Because the process, you know, when you understand the process, it kind of dictates what you have to do, because you're breaking muscle tissue down. You know, so if you train on a Monday and say you do bench press in your chest and bits afterwards, and then you go back on Wednesday and start doing that again, it hasn't had a chance to repair, because the process, you break the muscle tissue down, you feed it with protein, it grows back bigger and stronger. You know, so if you don't allow that process to complete, then you're constantly in a state of breaking the muscle down. So it's just being aware and listening to your body, because your body will tell you when you're ready to train again. You know, once the DOMs disappear and you start to feel good on it, then it's okay, time to break it down again.
This is interesting. Yeah, this is good, because I'm already feeling in my late 40s different than I did in my 30s, you know, and you're now in your 60s. So, and I did some training on Saturday with which was quite high volume on the chest and things. And I don't often get sore, but I'm you know, a bit tender today still on Monday, you know, from Saturday. So I do.
James is good. I'm a bit tender.
Yeah. No, but you know what I mean? I can feel, you know, you touch and you feel that feeling. And when I stretch, I can feel it's tight, you know? So,
but that's what you're supposed to feel like. If you're not sore, you're not training hard enough.
Yeah, I know.
The reason you're sore is you've broken down the muscle tissue. So if you've done a session and the next day and you're not feeling, you know, that those DOMs that usually kick in on day 2, train harder, up the weight.
Yeah, but what I was going to say was, I noticed that it does take longer to recover already at like late 40s than it did in, say, 30s and 20s. So, you know, certainly, like you say, like 61 now, it's that, like you say, listening to your body, knowing that you're going to recover fully, and then going again. But no, this is that. It's been so interesting, Stevie, talking to you. It really has, and I really like when we had we spent time with Magnus, and I sort of made the decision, right, I want to go out to Iceland, you know, and watch this and see it. I think having watched the Stoneland documentary before and speaking to you and meeting you, I think I will make it a commitment to get up to Scotland to watch this day, and Pete will come up with me as well, won't you, Pete?
We would love to see you there. Love to see you there.
Brilliant. Stevie, if people want to follow you, find out more about, you know, you and just what you do and that sort of thing, are you fairly active on sort of any social media platform? You're on Instagram and that sort of thing?
Pretty easy to find. I mean, it's just search for Stevie Shanks. That's my Instagram name. That's my Facebook name. I mean, I haven't added any fancy things to it, you know. And then I have a YouTube channel where I put some of my training videos out. I've got a grip video that I made, which actually explains a grip that my dad invented. So you know about hook grip?
Yeah.
So my dad invented a thing called the thumb grip. He didn't know about hook grip because, again, there wasn't social media and all the information out there. When he wanted to lift the stones on the rings, he could hold it with natural grip, open hand, as they call it. But he kind of thought, if I stick an iron bar in there, it'll straighten out the curve, which obviously would be cheating. He couldn't do that. So he thought, if I stick my thumb in there, you know, and actually use my thumb to straighten out the curve, then that would be a more sort of, it would make it feel more like a barbell. And that was, as we call that, is thumb grip. And the subtle difference, I'm not going into it in detail, but that would be your hook grip, where you just your index finger and your middle finger over your thumb, move them across one, so you have contact with all 4 fingers, you know, on your thumb, on the ring. But I made a video about that, so that's on my YouTube channel, And
so that thumb grip then, obviously, because the rings are so much thinner than a barbell, allows you to get more contact on the thumb and get tighter, doesn't it? Because a barbell's obviously thicker. You can't unless you've got very big hands and long fingers. Yeah, you can probably do that. No, that's fascinating.
And I have a website. The reason I created a website, Gordon Dinnie had a great website, but like I say, he unfortunately passed away. So his website was dormant. It wasn't moving anywhere. There was no new information. And over the years, all of the newspaper articles are like bar none. I think every single newspaper article I read that featured the Dinnie Stones or my dad, there was something in it that was inaccurate. They got the weights of the Stones wrong. They got my dad's name wrong. They got everything. There was, no matter what it was, if they could get it wrong, somewhere in some story you'll find an inaccuracy. So I thought I'll create a website and I'll put factual stuff on it. Particularly like history of the Stones, because history must be preserved, and particularly for me with the Dinnie Stones, I'm so passionate about it. So I created the website back in 16, 17, and I had all of the successful lifts with a link to their videos, all the information, and I'd link the other websites, again, just trying to join the thing. So that's just thedinniestones.com.
Brilliant.
So all of that information's out there, and I keep that updated, and I'm about to release the dates now for 2025 lifters who want to come along and to try their hand at Dinnie Stones. The guys are just letting me know, is it going to be the first Tuesday next month or the first Thursday? Once I clarify that with the owners, then I'll put all the dates out and they can start making appointments to lift the Stones through my website,
Brilliant. Yeah, this is fantastic. And just so everyone who, find Stevie online, follow Stevie, thedinniestones.com. If you search Stevie Shanks on YouTube as well, you'll find the YouTube channel, and a good place to start, even if you're kind of want to just know more about this and watch, would be maybe the Stoneland documentary on YouTube, and then obviously the Stones, the new documentary. If you just type in Stones, I found it. You do get quite a lot of like Rolling Stone stuff come up. So if you put like Stones and then like lifting Stones or maximum iron Stones, then that will come up as well. But no, this has been absolutely fascinating, and and just great to speak to you, Stevie. I mean, it's your passion,
you guys.
Your passion. Yeah, I mean, your passion for the Stones and the Dinnies and lifting in general just comes across just amazingly through the speaking to you. The passion for it and the excitement for it still is great. So yeah, do that, guys. Go and check out Stevie Shanks. Check out all of those things that we just said. Thank you so much, Stevie, for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. It was lovely meeting you last week for the first time. I kind of knew about you and your podcast, but we'd never actually met face to face. So, what a great team we were on the loading crew, eh?
We were a great team. Yeah, no,
we were a great team. Yes,
we were a great team. And thank you so much. You mentioned Jan Todd and Terry Todd on this as well. So I'm going to be sending Jan an email, and hopefully we may be able to get to speak to Jan as well, which would be fantastic. But yeah, thank you everybody for listening. And that was episode 214 with Stevie Shanks, which, fantastic. And lovely to go up to Scotland. That's going to be amazing. Next week, we are joined by the real Claire Rafferty. Claire is back with us next week. So she is... We've rescheduled Claire. She'll be back with us next week for episode 215. And in the meantime, please do like, share, subscribe. Leave a review if you're watching or listening on a platform that allows you to do so, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts. That's where we're trying to get the reviews. And especially this episode, if you've got people who may be interested in slight like odd lifts, different ways of training, but also history and culture, share this episode with them, because it's been really fascinating and really interesting. So we will see you next week for episode 215. Thank you very much, Stevie.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Peter Lance.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you next week. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
All the best, guys.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favourite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.